I said good evening. She smiled. We rode the elevator together to 4th floor. She got out before me and walked to the door right next to mine. I heard her key go in. I heard the door open. I heard it close behind her. The next morning I called the building man. He checked his records. He told me that apartment had been empty for 6 months. No lease, no key issued. The door had been sealed after the last tenant left. I told him I had heard it close. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said he'd look into it. He never called back. I moved into the building in early spring. 4th floor, apartment 14. The building was older, the kind that had been well maintained without ever being renovated. Clean hallways, slow elevator, the faint smell of someone else's cooking that moved through the ventilation system every evening around dinner time. The kind of building where you learn your neighbors by sound before you ever learn their names. I was there for work, a temporary relocation, 8 months, maybe 10. My company had transferred me to the city branch and the apartment came subsidized through the office. I didn't spend much time choosing it. I looked at the photos, checked the commute time, said yes. The first week I kept to myself, unpacked slowly, learned which burner on the stove ran hot, which window let in the morning light, which floorboard near the bathroom door made a sound when you stepped on it at night. Small things, the things that turn a place into somewhere you actually live. The apartment next to mine, number 13, was quiet. I noticed that early. In a building like this, quiet neighbors are something you appreciate without remarking. No music through the walls, no footsteps at odd hours. Just a steady, neutral silence that I found easy to live next to. Except for the coffee. Every morning, without exception, at 7:15, the smell came through the shared wall. Strong coffee, not the instant kind. The kind that takes time. The kind that means someone is standing in a kitchen waiting for something to finish brewing. It lasted maybe 20 minutes. Then it faded. Every morning, same time, same smell. I found it comforting at first. It meant someone was there. Some mornings that matters, knowing the space next to you isn't empty. I never knocked, never introduced myself. In cities like this one, in buildings like this one, you don't always need to. Proximity becomes its own kind of company. I saw her for the first time in the elevator about 3 weeks in. Small, dark coat, a canvas bag over one shoulder. She was already inside when the doors opened on the ground floor. I got in. She nodded. I nodded back. The elevator was slow. We stood in silence the way strangers in elevators do, looking at nothing, waiting for it to be over. At the 4th floor, we both got out. She turned left. I turned left. She stopped at 13. I stopped at 14. She had her key out already. I remember thinking she moved efficiently. No fumbling, no hesitation. The key went in. The door opened. She stepped through. The door closed. I went inside my own apartment and didn't think about it again. Over the following weeks, I saw her maybe 4 or 5 more times. Always in passing. Elevator, hallway, once at the mailboxes in the lobby. We exchanged the small words neighbors exchange. Hello, good evening, cold out today. She had a calm way of speaking, unhurried, the kind of person who doesn't fill silences unnecessarily. I still didn't know her name. I hadn't asked. It hadn't seemed necessary. The coffee smell continued every morning, 7:15, without fail. I had started timing my own mornings around it in a loose. When the smell came through the wall, I knew it was time to start getting ready. A small, unspoken routine shared through a wall between two people who barely knew each other. I thought nothing of it until the morning it didn't come. It was a Tuesday. I woke up at my usual time and lay there waiting. 7:15 came and went. No smell. I told myself she had slept in. I got ready and left. It didn't come the next morning either, or the morning after that. By the 4th morning, I was aware that I was listening for it. Standing in my kitchen with my own coffee, attention half directed at the wall. Silence. Just silence. I told myself people travel. People change routines. It meant nothing. Then I ran into the building manager in the lobby on a Friday afternoon. He was checking the mailboxes. We had spoken once before, briefly, when I moved in. He was a methodical man, the kind who keeps records of everything and trusts the records more than memory. I mentioned casually that I hadn't seen my neighbor recently. Asked if everything was all right with apartment 13. He looked up from the mailboxes. He asked me what I meant. I said my neighbor, the woman in 13. I hadn't seen her in a few days. He set down the envelope she was holding. He told me apartment 13 had been vacant since October. 6 months. The previous tenant had left without notice. Just stopped paying, stopped responding, cleared out over a weekend. The building had gone through the formal process. The door had been sealed, the utilities cut. There was no active lease. No one had been given keys. I stood there and listened to him say all of this. Then I told him I had ridden the elevator with her 4 weeks ago, that I had seen her go into that apartment with a key, that I had heard the door close. He looked at me for a moment, not unkindly, the way someone looks at you when they're trying to decide how to respond carefully. He said he would check. We walked up to the 4th floor together. The door to apartment 13 looked like every other door in the hallway. Same color, same handle, same number. But near the bottom of the frame, I saw it now that I was looking. A strip of adhesive seal, partially intact. the kind used to formally close a unit. It had been there for months. Undisturbed. The manager knocked anyway. We waited. Nothing. He produced a master key, looked at me once, and unlocked the door. The apartment was empty. Not just unoccupied, bare. No furniture, no curtains. The kind of emptiness that accumulates over months, not days. Dust on the windowsills. The faint smell of a closed room, stale air, old paint, nothing else. No coffee maker, no kitchen items, no signs that anyone had been inside recently. I walked through it slowly. Living room, kitchen, the single bedroom, the bathroom, everything the same. Undisturbed dust on every surface. The kitchen counter clean but dull, the way surfaces get when they haven't been used in a long time. I stood in the kitchen and thought about the smell. 7:15 every morning for weeks. Strong coffee, the kind that takes time. Coming through this wall, from this kitchen, from a room that showed no evidence of ever having had anyone. The manager was watching me from the doorway. I asked him about the seal on the door, whether it could have been reapplied from the outside after someone entered. He said technically yes, with the right adhesive, if someone wanted to make it look undisturbed. I asked who had the master key. He said himself, and the building owner, and a spare kept in the office downstairs. I asked if the spare had ever gone missing. He paused, then he said not that he knew it. We left the apartment. He resealed the door. He said he would review the entrance camera logs and let me know if he found any. He seemed less certain now than he had been in the lobby, less settled. I went back to my apartment and sat at the kitchen table. I thought about every interaction. Elevator, hallway, mailboxes, her face, her dark coat, the canvas bag, the calm, unhurried way she spoke. I tried to find something off about any of it, something I had missed, some detail that didn't fit. There was nothing. She had seemed completely ordinary, completely real. I thought about the key. She had used a key. I had watched it go into the lock, watched the door open, watched it close. These were not impressions. These were things I had observed at close range, in adequate light, while fully awake. That night I didn't sleep well. I lay in the dark and listened to the wall between my apartment and number 13. Complete silence. No movement, no sounds at all. At 3:40 a.m. I heard something. Not footsteps, not a voice. A sound I couldn't immediately identify. Low, continuous, lasting maybe 10 seconds. Then stopping, then nothing. I lay still and waited. It didn't come again. In the morning I checked the wall from my side. Nothing unusual. I pressed my hand against it. Cold, solid, the way walls are. I stood there for a moment with my palm flat against the plaster. The manager called that after. The entrance camera log showed me entering and exiting the building on the dates I had mentioned. They showed other residents coming and going. They showed no one entering who matched the description I had given. No woman in a dark coat with canvas bag. Not on any of the dates I had seen her. Not on any date in the past 6 months. He said he was sorry he couldn't tell me more. I thanked him and hung up. I went to the hallway and looked at the door to apartment 13 for a long time. The resealed strip along the bottom of frame. The stillness of it. I thought about the elevator, the slow ride up, her standing slightly ahead of me, looking at the panel. The small words we had exchanged at the mailboxes. The nod on the first morning. I thought about whether any of it had been directed at me specifically. Whether there was intention behind it. Whether the routine, the coffee, the appearances, the careful normalcy of it was constructed. Whether I was meant to notice. Or whether I was meant not to, until now. I couldn't answer any of it. I requested a room change from my company the following week. Different building, different part of the city. I told them the commute was inconvenient. They processed it without questions. I packed in 2 days. Moving out of apartment 14 felt different from moving in. Faster, less careful. I didn't linger. On my last morning, I stood in the empty living room with my bag and took one look at the wall I shared with number 13. Quiet, as it always was. As it apparently had always been. I left without speaking to the manager again. I left without looking at the door to apartment 13 as I passed it in the hallway. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. The new apartment was on the second floor of a modern building. Glass and steel, electronic key fobs, a lobby camera that covered every angle. I checked all of it on the first day. I slept fine the first week, the second week too. Third week, a Tuesday morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee. The smell of it filled the room the way it always does. I stood there waiting for it to finish. And then from the apartment next to mine, through the wall to my left, I smelled it. Coffee. Strong. The kind that takes time. I looked at the clock. 7:15. I stood completely still. I told myself it was a neighbor. A real neighbor this time. Someone with a lease. A name in the records. A key that was properly issued. Someone who simply made coffee at the same time every morning. A coincidence. The kind that happens. I stood there and I almost believed it. I haven't knocked on that wall. I haven't asked the manager about the apartment next door. I haven't looked at who comes and goes on my floor. Some things, once you start pulling at them, don't stop unraveling. The coffee comes every morning. I've stopped timing my day around it, but I notice it every time.